Okay, we are now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome members, officers, and the press and public joining the meeting tonight. This is the Local Development Committee. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to everyone viewing on YouTube. Some of our officers are joining this evening via Zoom, and some will be in the chamber as well. Can everyone online hear me? Thumbs up, that means a yes. My name is Councillor James Beckles, and I will be chairing this evening's Local Development Committee. For the members in the room, when you are speaking, can you please speak clearly and loudly so that the microphone can pick you up? For those joining by Zoom, please mute your microphone if you are not speaking. I will now ask the members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. So, what's my right?
Councillor Sujitska, please read this word.
Councillor Mujiburama, please read this word.
Councillor Saeed Bashar, Little Limpur.
Councillor Salim Patel from Manor Park Ward.
Councillor Mahmood Mirza, Bolin Ward.
Councillor Imam Haq, East Ham Ward. Thank you.
Femi Falola, East Ham.
And to officers on my right.
Samir Ben Barrett, Principal Planner.
Adi Wang, Senior Planner.
And behind.
Veronica Southbank, Democratic Services Park.
Thank you very much. And online, please introduce yourself.
I'm Jane Custance. I'm the Director of Planning and Development. Handing to Vincent.
Vincent Healy, Legal Advisor.
Alex, have you introduced yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Alex Williams, I'm representing an objector on the 57 Hallsville Road scheme. I'll be speaking later.
Thank you very much. I want to remind members that when a vote is being taken, it will be by way of showing your hands and raising them in order that we can capture this on screen. Do we all agree? Yes. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies. Do we have any apologies for tonight's meeting?
Mr. Chair, Councillor Sabia Kamal.
Okay, I have Liz Cronin as Councillor Liz Cronin.
Sabia.
Yep, Sabia's been captured. Anyone else? We full house, thank you. Okay, item 2 is minutes of the last meeting. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of May 2025 for approval and outlined on pages 13 to 20. So let's just take a brief moment to look through the minutes. So page 13, we're all present. 14. And 15. Any amendments, corrections? Are we happy with those? So, yeah. So we'll take that as agreed. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for tonight's meeting?
No.
None? Okay, let's record none there. Determining planning applications. Members are asked to note the advice from the head of legal services on determining planning applications. Members are asked if they received and considered the update report that was circulated earlier today. Is that noted?
Yeah.
Thank you. There's requests to address the committee tonight. The committee has received the following requests to address the committee. Would the speaker please identify themselves when I call out your name? So for item 6, 57 Hallsville, we've got Councillor Alex Williams. You've already introduced yourself. We've got Adam Williams. Thank you very much. Gavin Redfern and Sana Khan. Thank you. Item 7, land of the rear of 330 Romford Road. We've got Matthew Johnson.
Yes, Chair.
You online? Okay, thank you. The usual practice is to allow up to 5 minutes in total for both supporters and objectors. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Can we agree the remainder of the order of the business and as outlined in the agenda? Okay, we can take that as agreed. Would members please note the officer update report circulated? Please note the full consideration and the planning assessment of the matters is covered comprehensively in the committee report. I trust that members have had full regard of the committee report. The officer presentation will be a summary of the key issues only. Can I ask the planning officer to present the application? So let's start with item 6, which is 57 Hallsville. Samir.
Okay, good evening. This is item 6 at number 57 Hallsville Road. The application has been submitted by Adamson's Investments. The application site is a two-storey building located within a semicircular plot that fronts onto Hallsville Road, Roscoe Road and Shirley Street. The site is locally listed and is located within the Canning Town Centre. The proposal is for the erection of a six-storey mixed-use building following demolition of the existing pub building. The upper floors would accommodate residential use, whilst the ground floor would accommodate a commercial unit and a series space for residential use above. In February 2025, this planning application was considered at local development committee, in which it resolved to agree to grant the reasons as set out in the committee report and to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to completion of a legal agreement and conditions as recommended by officers. Members also recommended a condition for commemoration strategy in respect to the formerly locally listed pub. The Section 106 legal agreement is currently being drafted. However, a representation was received from the owner of the neighbouring site at number 55 Hallsville Road, outlining that in the assessment detailed in the Local Development Committee report of February 2025, officers did not consider the impacts the development would have upon development potential at this neighbouring site. Therefore, for the sake of transparency, this application is to be resolved again at Local Development Committee, taking into account the representation received. Please be advised that this presentation is not a reassessment of the proposed scheme and is to discuss the received representation. However, just to provide a summary of the scheme and a recap, planning permission was granted for 95 square metres of commercial floor space at ground floor level and 18 residential units above, and planning obligations secured included affordable housing, car-free development and various financial contributions, including towards local employment and zero carbon. And just to refresh them with some floor plans showing the ground, first to third and fourth and above, and the proposed elevations as agreed at committee in February 2025. The representation from number 55 Hallsville Road notes in summary, placement of the windows of both the proposed scheme and the Sphere building constrains development. Policy S1 of the local plan requires development to be designed and developed comprehensively, high densities and tall buildings, and concerns expressed by design officers previously. Officers respond that irrespective of the proposed development, any substantial development in order to achieve a higher density at this neighbouring site would face challenges given the proximity of the windows on the existing neighbouring properties, in particular the Sphere development. This is demonstrated on the image on the left-hand side, which highlights the windows of the proposed development facing 55 Hallsville Road and the existing windows of the Sphere development. Officers further respond that the application site of number 57 Hallsville Road has been designed comprehensively, is not a piecemeal development, and whilst design officers' previous reservations are noted, this was a desire from an urban design perspective, and overall planning permission cannot be refused on lack of development on the neighbouring site. In summary, whilst not explicitly outlined in the committee report of February 2025, officers considered the context of the site as less sensitive as no granted permission, active applications or recent pre-applications pertaining to development at this neighbouring site. Officers also considered development at number 57 Hallsville Road to not hinder development potential at number 55. Further representations have been received from both the applicant side and number 55 Hallsville Road, which officers have tried to relate to each party for both transparency and for the right response. Officers maintain the scheme at number 57 Hallsville Road would not unacceptably prejudice or impact the neighbouring site to an extent that a scheme would not be deliverable. Furthermore, officers consider it inappropriate and unreasonable to provide comment on a hypothetical scheme on the neighbouring site, as this application is to assess the development at number 57 Hallsville Road and the impacts at the time the assessment was made. So therefore, to conclude, the Local Development Committee is asked to resolve to 1, agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report dated the 24th of February 2025, as amended 23rd of June 2025, and 2, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to completion of legal agreement and conditions as in the committee report dated 24th February 25, amended 23rd of June 2025. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Samir. Alex, you still... Yeah, you are. You have 5 minutes if you'd like to raise a representation.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just make sure before I start that everybody can hear me?
Yeah, super.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and many thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Alex Williams, and I'm a practicing barrister, and I represent Orbit Property Holdings Limited, And on behalf of my client, I object to this scheme. As has been pointed out, Orbit owns the neighbouring site at 55 Hallsville Road, which it recently purchased from the council. Before Orbit bought the site, the council marketed the site as land with, quote, considerable redevelopment potential, whilst the current application at number 57 Hallsville Road was in train. And I should point out that Orbit has recently submitted an outline planning application for a housing scheme on its own site. That is also now in train as a result. Now, the application you're currently considering, the one at 57 Hallsville Road, proposes windows and balconies on the western side elevation of the new building. Those windows and balconies are directly on the boundary of my client's site and would directly overlook it. Orbit is concerned that the presence of those windows and balconies would make it impossible to deliver a viable housing scheme on its own site. Under normal circumstances, Orbit's site could accommodate up to 6 new homes. But if these windows and balconies at 57 Hallsville are installed, that would cut down the number of residential units on the neighbouring site down by half to just 3. And crucially, that would not be a viable scheme. So in effect, granting tonight's application would mean the loss of up to 6 new homes at my client's site, which would no longer be deliverable. Now, as a result of the prejudice that it would cause to Orbit's site, the 57 Hallsville Road proposal does, we say, conflict with the council's policies, particularly policy S1, which expressly discourages piecemeal development that prejudices the council's overall vision for the area. Both of these sites are in the tall building area, where the council expects higher density in order to achieve good growth. And it doesn't make any sense to grant this application without considering the detrimental effect that it would have on deliverability at the neighbouring site. Now, this is a serious issue, but there is a sensible practical solution which Orbit has raised with the council and which it raised as soon as it became aware of this impact. If the developer were to amend the scheme at 57 Hallsville Road by removing the windows and balconies on the western side elevation, the prejudice to our site would disappear. The council would then have the benefit of the new homes from this application and up to 6 new homes from my client's site. In my client's view, those amendments would be achievable. And to that end, Orbit has already provided council officers with plans indicating that the amendments could be made without impacting either the number of homes or the housing mix on the 57 Hallsville Road site. Orbit is not aware of any good reason why those amendments for number 57 could not, in principle, be made. So the upshot is that I'm asking the committee, on behalf of my client, to defer further consideration of this application in order for that issue of amending the scheme to be fully explored with the developer. Alternatively, if the committee doesn't see fit to do that, then I'm asking the committee to reject the application because of its conflict with the council's policies, and that conflict, of course, is caused by the prejudice to Orbit's site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and within time. So the next group of speakers will be, and how you divide the time amongst yourselves, I'll let you decide, will be Adam, Gavin and Sana who will be presenting. Okay, let me know when you begin.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm Adam Williams from CMA Planning, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant who's present along with our architect and other members of the project team. As members will recall, the application was considered recently at the February committee meeting, where members resolved to grant planning permission, recognising the benefits that the scheme would bring. As you've heard since then, the adjoining site at number 55 has changed hands, and these new owners have raised concerns about what is possible on their site. Your officers have already addressed the points raised, and we agree with the independent and expert assessment of the issue. Just as a brief summary, we would highlight that number 55 is overlooked in multiple directions, most notably by the affordable housing block to the west, which is known as Alfred Dickens House, or also known as the Sphere, which has numerous habitable windows that overlook their site. The objective has put forward a very diagrammatic hypothetical proposal for their site with a building that comes forward to the back edge of pavement, which has not been discussed with the council as part of a normal pre-application process. The main issue with this is that it causes an impact on the 6 habitable room windows within Alfred Dickens' house. These windows are just over 2 metres from the site boundary, extremely close. Firstly, positioned in indicative building some 4 metres away from these windows. It's not considered that this would be acceptable. It would cause a major loss of outlook and create an overbearing sense of enclosure for these. It also significantly reduce daylight and sunlight. Whilst their proposal does have a small setback, this is a tokenistic gesture that is not addressed by the inclusion, nor will it maintain light as it's claimed. That said, we do feel development is possible at number 55, and our proposal is to take this into account. This would allow the site to come forward and to deliver new homes without causing them to enter the lighting outlet of existing residents. As part of the design development for our scheme, we drew up a proposal for the site, so we can say with some certainty that our scheme would not blight or prejudice their site. It can therefore be seen that our application would not prejudice the realisation of the overall vision for the area, nor would it result in the development of any sites in a piecemeal way. It would therefore comply with local plan policy S1. We would also raise the point about the timing of the purchase of the adjoining site. This happened after you had approved our application in February. The objector is a professional with a team of experts to assist, including architects and lawyers. They would have been aware when they purchased the site that not only was there a planning application running next door, but that it had been approved by this committee. They chose to purchase the site anyway. If they felt it was not possible to deliver a scheme on their site, then why did they purchase the site? The objection seems disingenuous, to say the least. As your officers highlight, only very limited weight can be given to any high-level scheme at this stage, nor would it be appropriate to amend an existing acceptable development based on a hypothetical. Not that acceptable prejudice or impact on the neighbouring site to the extent that it would be unbelievable. It's in fact been designed to allow for development next door. Given this, it's felt that the objections without merit and that the original decision of the council to grant permission should stand. We are of course more than happy to the Progressive Committee recognises the benefits of the scheme and feels able to grant plan permission against. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contributions. I've now moved to member questions. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Huck.
My question is to you, sir, that the objection by Alex raised one point, which is that some of the points are against the council policy. Have those all been considered, and if there is anything that is against the council policy?
So in terms of council policies, in terms of it not being argued it's not complying with such, so policy S1 is quite a strategic policy where it does say about sites being designed comprehensively and with one another. Whilst we do recognise that the site on its own within the red line plan, we consider has been designed comprehensively and has been designed with next door in mind with the placings of the windows and the balconies. Also, overall, as a strategic principle, the development does comply with that strategic policy because it's providing residential and commercial within a designated town centre. So whilst not every policy, maybe word for word, can be adhered to within the planning balance and within different policies, we do believe that it does comply with the policy broadly.
Yes, supplementary, yeah.
And were the consultation were in place before we came to a conclusion of approving this one by the council?
Sorry?
Were the consultation took place before we came to a conclusion by yourself?
Yeah, so 3 rounds of consultation was done for this application.
And there were no objections there?
There were objectors from other neighbours.
Councillor Mirza.
Thank you, Chair. I understand there's a needs of housing in the Borough of Newham, but is this something to do with the council policy 50% social housing or affordable housing without the permission? We cannot give a permission to any development if it is more than 10 dwelling building. There has to be 50% social housing, and the affordable housing, it says 2,279. I don't understand what's that mean. Can you explain, please?
So the application was secured and agreed with 11% affordable housing. That was after a submission of a viability assessment, which tested that that was the most that the development can bring while still delivering the scheme. So any scheme that can't deliver the 35 to 50% of affordable housing as per London Plan and Newham policy has the right to do a viability assessment. That was tested by our independent viability assessor, who agreed that an 11%, which is 2 social rent units in this case, with the £2,279 sum payment on top.
Yes, so-
Supplementary.
yes.
Yeah.
So is the independent, they come up with the idea, it's 11% is sufficient instead of 50%, that's what you said. Okay, and the rest of them, 88% is for the commercial, is for the sale, is it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This one.
Thank you. Councillor Falola.
My question is to you, sir. You mentioned something that this has been approved before, and why are they refusing it now? Do you consider when you put that proposal in place, how it's going to affect your neighbors, or you didn't think of it?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we do. So in the original design and access statement that was submitted to the planning application, there is a section that specifically deals with how our development can come forward with a development on the neighbouring site. And this illustrates the fact that whilst the front part of the neighbouring site is constrained by the neighbouring windows within Alfred Dickens' house, the rear part of the site is able to accommodate new development, and the majority of the boundary it's not our site, it's actually 46 Shirley Road. And so we worked with officers throughout the pre-application and application process to demonstrate that a scheme can come forward on number 55 yards.
Because,
Please come here.
because what I'm thinking about now is that it's just one person coming up now, the house opposite. What about if other neighbors come out and say, this is affecting us? Have you considered that as well?
Sorry, to guess, I don't.
You know, if just one person who's opposite complaining now, do you think it could affect another neighbor, another person within the street, within the area?
Do I think the development number 55 can affect other neighbours?
Yes.
The principal effect would be on Alfred Dickens' house, because that site includes windows that immediately adjacent. But obviously there are other residential properties at the rear at 46. So there needs to be. When we considered the massing of our alternative scheme, we did consider the position of neighbouring windows and what the light.
Thank you.
And for the benefit for those in the room and online, we've been joined by Councillor Noor Begum. Fortunately, you won't be able to vote on this item as proceedings have started. Yes. But you are welcome to ask any questions if you have any. I have a question, and this is to Alex. I think Adam has stated that your application or your, I guess your representation has been made after the planning permission has been granted, and also when your client purchased the land, you would have been aware, or your client would have been aware, that there was an application pending. Taking all that into consideration, is there any other reason why your representation now and members should take that on board?
I just want to emphasise two things, if I may, Councillor. The first thing is that as has been pointed out, no objection was made by my client at the time that representations could have been made, but that was for the simple reason that at the time my client didn't own the site. The council did, however, own the site. And as I mentioned earlier, it was marketing it as developable or land with considerable developable potential. So that explains, I would suggest, why no objections were made at the time. And of course, here we are making our objection now. It is later in the process, perhaps, than we would like, but nevertheless, it's no less important as a result. The second, and I do just want to underscore this point, is that my client has made a planning application for outline permission for a scheme which would be Class E at ground floor, and would contain 6 residential units. And I make that point to emphasise and to respond to a point made by your officer earlier, who talked about comparing the current scheme with a hypothetical scheme. Our scheme is not hypothetical. There is an application in train, and that application is for 6 units. And as we have said, it would prejudice that scheme for the current 57 Hallsville Road scheme to go ahead.
Thank you. And to Adam, in terms of, I guess, working with Alex and his client, has there been any sort of reach out on your part to help amend the scheme? Or to Sana? Yeah.
No, we were approached to purchase the site next door because we had a meeting with their representatives. They reached out to us to say they purchased the site without viewing. It was part of a bulk purchase, and we were told, we were offered to purchase the site. We then said, look, we are too far down with our application. It doesn't make sense for us at this stage to go ahead and purchase. When questioned, why did you purchase it without any searches, etc.? They said, to be completely honest with you, it's part of a bulk buy, and they didn't really look into the facts about, what was going on in the surrounding areas. So, it's not a case of, I would say, it's not a case of the objections were not raised because they were not the owners. The objections were simply not raised because sufficient searches were not done prior to that purchase happening, because it was a bulk buy in addition to another 5 sites, which I understand. So they tried to sell it to us, but we said, look, it's no good to us. And if we were to purchase that particular site, we would be only happy to pay what the market value is, and therefore come forward, do an open market valuation of the site, and we may consider it. After that point, we didn't hear anything because I think they probably, I don't know if the cost didn't weigh out to them, or I don't know what may have happened after that. But that was the initial proposal about 6 weeks ago. They wanted to sell it to us. So up until 6 weeks ago, there wasn't no plan of any development or anything of that nature. It was simply a case of either we come on as a joint venture partner, which is impossible because we've gone so far ahead into our scheme, or the other option was, do you wish to purchase? And the answer was, well, if it's at whatever the market value comes back at. But they did express concern that they actually purchased it as a bulk buy of 6 sites. They didn't do the sufficient searches, and hence, they now had to do something about it.
So thank you. Before I bring you in, Councillor Mahmood, I just wanted to ask, in terms of if the applicants were to remove the windows and balcony, would there be a material impact on potential residents moving in?
Well,
especially daylight sunlight.
Yeah, well, the units wouldn't be habitable because there's no outdoor amenity and the windows are serving habitable spaces. So it would mean half the units wouldn't be habitable, or would be a really significant reconfiguration, which then have a knock-on impact on viability and other material planning considerations.
And Councillor Mercer.
My question is, what was the estimated price of the units will be, the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom in the market when it's developed? Any idea?
I'll have to refer to the applicant.
Finish, but probably, in that particular area around about 350,000, 400,000.
Or 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom?
2 bedroom is probably around about 475.
3 bedroom?
About 550.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Councillor Huck.
Yeah. So this one came in the previous meetings as well by my colleague Farola, Councillor Farola. I just wanted to ask, like, if there is, I know there is no such rules, but will you be giving priority to local residents than the residents who are coming from outside the borough?
To be honest with you, yes, I think that, local residents would of course be given priority, but we're not going to be closing doors on anyone if they come from another borough. Of course not, it all depends, obviously, whoever, comes forward, but naturally I would assume that it would be from the local residents, indeed, people from the local area.
Yeah, but so your intention is to help the local residents in the borough. Thank you.
I was going to say, just to clarify that in terms of the social housing, that will be only for Newham residents.
Only for Newham residents.
Yes.
that 12% or 11% something.
And is there anything that, from a planning perspective, in terms of planning regulations or any within our local plan, whether amended or current, that can, I guess, dictate or guide towards the 88% being advertised first to new resident, or it's because it's an open market, it just goes to
Under planning legislation,
Yeah.
that's something unfortunately we can't control. But we can control social housing.
Okay, social housing, but not the open market ones. Okay. Any further questions from members? As there are no more questions, we now move to the recommendations. I know there's been a lot to consider tonight, but let's review those. So the Local Development Committee is asked to resolve to, 1, agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report dated 24th February 2025, amended for tonight's meeting, 23rd of June 2025, and 2, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and further details there. But those members who do agree to this, please show of hands. Councillor Norm, I'm afraid you can't vote. That is unanimous, and sorry, not unanimous, so there's 7, 4, and any abstentions? And none against, so there's 1 abstention, 7, 4, so planning permission is granted. Thank you very much for your time, and Alex, thank you for your representation. We now move to item 7. You're welcome to stay unless you wish to depart. And that's land to the rear of 330 Romford Road, Forest Gate. And Freddie, I'll hand over to you.
Good evening. I'm going to present item number 7, which is a minor material amendments to a previously approved planning permission at the rear of 330 Romford Road. The site is a plot of land. The site is a plot of land on the southern side of Romford Road, which was previously occupied by a warehouse. At present, demolition works has been largely completed. This slide shows the site on Romford Road when viewed from the north.
So Freddie, can I ask you to speak up a bit, please? Thanks.
This slide shows the access to the site from Palmerston Road. The primary site access to the site is on the left, and on the right is the rear secondary access. This minor material amendment application has been made to vary condition 17 of the planning permission considered by the committee in 2019 and was approved in 2021 following the completion of the section 106 agreements. In particular, this application seeks to modify the wording of condition 17 use by removing the restriction on the occupancy period of maximum 6 weeks as highlighted above. This application, an application made under section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act can be used to make a material amendment by varying or removing conditions associated with a planning permission. There's no statutory limit on the degree of change permissible to conditions under section 73, but the change must be only related to conditions, in this case, condition 17. For your information, this scheme has already commenced works within the 3 years since 2021, and the proposed amendment in this application would not result in the change in description of developments. The key considerations of the proposed amendments under this application are principle of development, quality of accommodation, and impacts to the neighboring amenity. This image shows the northern and eastern elevations of the approved application. These images show the western and southern elevations of the approved application. This shows the approved ground floor plan. And this is the first floor plan and second floor plan to the right. The original planning permission was granted for the demolition of existing buildings and the construction of 4-story building to provide 27 emergency accommodation units. The principle of development was considered acceptable in the original planning application, and the proposal to remove the restriction of maximum length of stays does not result in changes of the proposed emergency accommodation use or any intensification of the use. Therefore, the principle is still considered acceptable. In terms of quality of accommodation, all the units would meet the Pan London quality benchmarks for this type of accommodation. These units will be provided with individual cooking, washing, and dining facilities. In addition, 2 wheelchair users units will also be provided. The image shows the typical layout of a 3-bed, 6-person unit and a studio unit for 2-person. In the original approved application, the proposed facilities were considered to be one of those with short-term nature. The applicant proposes to removal of the 6-week restriction, which would provide the council more time to place residents in alternative accommodation and avoiding the need for the council to identify other accommodation options once the 6 weeks period is over. In the context of the council's and London's acute housing needs, which have been dramatically increased since the approval of the original application more than 5 years ago, the applicant referenced the London's Temporary Accommodation Emergency Report published in 2024, and the National Government Statistics, highlighting the acute pressures facing local authorities, especially Newham. The quality of accommodation afforded to the future residents is comparable to other similar type of accommodation with a mix of communal and private living spaces with separate bedroom areas. Therefore, the quality of accommodation is considered suitable. And as such, the officers consider the removal of the restriction of the maximum duration of stay per residency term as imposed through conditions 17 in the approved permission would be on balance acceptable in terms of quality of accommodation afforded to future residents. In terms of neighboring amenity, the proposed amendment does not involve any alteration to the approved scheme in terms of its use, design, or the physical form. It is considered that no adverse impacts to the neighboring amenity would arise from the proposed amendment. In any case, the removal of the restriction of the maximum residency term of 6 weeks would have less impact as compared to the approved scheme in terms of noise and disturbance arising from the comings and goings due to the transient nature of the future residents. Therefore, the application is considered acceptable in this regard. Given the proposal only seeks amendments to the condition wording relating to the maximum length of stay, officer consider other material consideration assessed under the approved application would remain acceptable. The current permission original granted in 2021 is subject to a statutory time limit to commence the development within 3 years from the approved date. The wording shall be revised according to reflect the date. Condition 3, requiring the submission of a demolition and construction management plan, was attached to the original permission. This has already been discharged in January 2024. It's considered that the revised scheme would not require resubmission of the details, and hence condition 3 should be revised accordingly as a compliance condition. And for condition 17, the use, which is the condition proposed to be varied by the applicant under this application, would be amended accordingly to remove the wordings featuring the 6-week restriction. Also, the reference legislation would also need to be updated accordingly to reflect the most up-to-date legislation as shown in the slide. All other planning conditions and Section 106 agreements in relation to the approved scheme will still apply. This would include the Section 106 agreement on the nominations agreement, giving first refusal on any accommodation within the development before it could be offered to anyone not on Newham's waiting list. This would ensure that accommodation would be available to the council primarily and firstly to help alleviate housing needs. With respect to all the above matters, the proposal is supported as detailed in the committee report. The local development committee is asked to resolve to agree to reasons for approval as set out in the committee report. and delegated authority to the Director of Planning Development to grant planning permissions subject to a completion of legal agreements under Section 106 of Town Planning Country Act 1990, based on the heads of terms identified at Appendix 10 of the report and condition listed in Appendix 9 of the report. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Freddie. Matthew Johnson, are you still with us?
I am, Chair, yes.
Thank you. You've got 5 minutes to make a representation. Let me know when you want to begin.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I didn't really have a great deal to say. I just wish to thank the officer for their very comprehensive report and presentation to you just now. I hope that you and the other councillors can support the recommendation, and I'm available here to answer any questions if councillors have any.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions on this item? Councillor Flora.
Your part of your presentation said it's an hostel. That means there's going to be increasing footfall around that place. Is there any provision for that for the resident, the current resident around that place? How would that affect them in their day-to-day activities when you see a number of people coming to that area for a short period?
Yeah. In the original approved application, approved in 2021, considered by the committee in 2019, this aspect had already been assessed, and officers at that time considered it was necessary to impose a condition to require a management plan for this type of accommodation, which is very typical for this type of accommodation. The management plan would set out the operation times and the uses and all the others aspects that might affect the neighboring amenity of the neighbors. And in this application, this is only to do with the proposed removal of the 6 weeks restriction. So we cannot, we're not going to add on to the assessment that the original application made. So there's no further conditions or anything to do with this.
In terms of the original application, which is a good point by Councillor Falola, the management plan, it sets out how the residents inside the proposed property, they would be managed. Their comings and goings will be monitored, or somewhat to mitigate any sort of adverse impact on the high street and the public realm. And in terms of, I guess, the PTAL rating, Romford Road is a very busy road, but these individuals, they will be coming and going at various times in the day, which I think Councillor Flora is trying to mention. Is there any negative impact on residents? Just so that we have an idea about the last application.
Yeah. In terms of the management plan, I can go through some of the details that will be required to be included. For example, site security and access arrangements, and restrictions on noise level, including amplified music, and also procedures for managing potentially challenging behaviors of residents, and also detrimental impacts on surrounding residents in terms of noise and disturbance and antisocial behavior and crime. So all this will be included in the management plan to be submitted. Also, there will be procedures for managing complaints, methods of making a complaint for local residents and members of the public.
Councillor Flora, do you have any follow-up?
But I was just going to ask, you've mentioned it, but my thinking is that most hostels find people hanging around in the street, in the front of the hostel. How would that be controlled?
In the original application, this has been what officers at that time think, because the noise, but there is an internal courtyard of the proposed development. So there will be a lounge, and they're all very internal and not out on the street. So the assessment was thinking that would create sufficient buffer to mitigate noise going outside external from the courtyard. That was part of the assessment.
And just to note that we have very little powers or remit to look at and to go over the first application. We're mainly considering move of the 6 weeks limit and be open to, is there any length of time these will be open to?
Yeah, virtually by removing the 6 weeks limits, there will be no limit on the time that residents put into it. The applicant's rationale for this is to allow the councils more time to put the affected people into suitable accommodation, as he or she has quoted various statistics report. Newham is one of the most affected councils in terms of the shortage of temporary housing. So typically people do stay more than 6 weeks. So that is to avoid people to be put in, to be kicked out of this accommodation and for them to be come back in, or like for them to be relocated to something more temporary than this, and then going back to the permanent temporary accommodation.
We are facing somewhat of a housing crisis and homelessness crisis, but I think it does take solutions outside of simply housing people. And I want to know from Matthew, if he's aware, what sort of support these individuals will get once they're in that property, or is it merely just a hostel in which they come to sleep and they're back on the streets the next day, or will they have any sort of adult social care involvement?
I know the operator and developer here is a very experienced operator and developer of emergency accommodation. And I think this maybe brings us back to the management plan that was being spoke about, and it is a condition on the permission that we need to discharge, that the council will need to approve. Part of, I think, the quality of the accommodation that's being proposed here is about trying to offer people support while they're in the accommodation. It remains, as I say, emergency accommodation. It's not the intention these people would be here for an indefinite period. But I think there's two things here. There's making sure that there isn't the trauma of them being moved, every 6 weeks, as the planning officer just mentioned. But equally, as I say, the quality of the accommodation is to try and give them somewhere that is of a high quality, but also offers them support while they're there, and that forms part of the management plan. That forms part of what the operator does in their other facilities by offering that support.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on that. To members, Azhar.
My question is related to green space and open area. Is there any provision within the planning for green space, open area?
Green space. In the original scheme, there are a courtyard where there will be some landscaping. So ideally, it's for the residents to come out to enjoy the external space. And the details of this has not been decided yet, because the conditions for the soft and hard landscaping condition is still not yet submitted in the original application. But then there is some drawings or illustrations and in the report. If you look at the ground floor plan on the page 5 of the report, there is some very indicative drawings of the courtyard, and the applicant has proposed some landscaping works there.
If it's helpful, councillor, as well, I think it's condition 10, which planning officer's just referring to there, about the landscape works that we need to submit to the council for approval. But that condition specifically talks about furniture and play equipment. One of the things that the applicant was keen to do here, and is still keen to do here, and the condition requires, is having some play space in that courtyard area, so that actually the children of the families that are staying here, while they are staying here, they at least have some outdoor space that they can use and enjoy.
On that, I do understand there's a shortage of housing, temporary accommodation as well, but we should not forget the importance of open area and also the green space. There's already the green space that we have in the borough, and with this, population growing and new people coming in, or let's say even the buildings that we are allowing the developers to build, is having a huge impact on the existing residents. So we should consider this when giving the plans, open spaces for all the new builds, so that it have a little impact on the existing residents and green spaces. Thank you.
And Matthew, is that something that we probably can't condition now unless we can and rely on officers? But just to, as Councillor Huck mentioned about the importance of green space, landscaping in this property and development, that it doesn't feel harsh. You've spoken about quality and high quality of the rooms, but also the outside landscaping would probably reflect that we want it to be welcoming and for people who are in very difficult circumstances to be in an environment that's inviting for them as well as helping enhance the property as well.
Exactly, Chair. I think, again, if I can maybe point back to condition 10, it is a very detailed, very specifically worded condition that talks about hard and soft landscape works. It talks about furniture and play equipment, and the council has the opportunity to approve those details when we submit them. So I think in conversation with officers, I'd like to think we can find something that meets the objectives that the council has just described there.
Thank you. There, any further questions, Councillor Falola?
No, Mr. Matthew Johnson, I'm just going to follow up the chair's question the other time. If I heard you well, you said the time frame is going to be 6 weeks. They can't be there indefinite. So what is the provision? What is the next step? Or we just tell them to go out on the street, or we liaise with another company or another department to help these people?
So I'll try my best to help as I can here, Councillor, because I think this is straying slightly into territory that your housing officers will deal with. As a town planner, I can speak about planning housing policy, and how the housing team works is a little bit different. But as I understand it, because and part of the mechanism here is, as the planning officer described, that Newham is offered the places first. The council is offered these places first. I think the process then is that the housing team within the council is then looking for suitable long-term accommodation for those residents. And I think what this application is trying to address is that sort of interim issue where at the moment it is taking longer than 6 weeks to find that accommodation, and without wishing to repeat myself, it comes back to avoiding that trauma of families having to move on every 6 weeks, or as the planning officer said, them being moved to a different accommodation and then finding themselves homeless again, or back in some other lower quality accommodation. So as I understand it, Councillor, your housing officers, they're placing a family here in this accommodation, and while the family is there, those housing officers are working very hard to try and find suitable alternative accommodation. Some of the other officers may know a little bit more than I do on that, but that's my understanding.
Thank you. Betty, do you have anything further to add to Matthew's comments? Okay. Are you satisfied with that?
I think you were saying that you work with the housing department, housing officer. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding, Councillor. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think some of the questions tonight are indicative of where we are in Newham, the fact that we've got a very high number of our residents in emergency housing, and it can become slightly long-term. So I wish somebody from housing were here to kind of reassure us a bit more about, I guess, the transition from emergency to secure housing, but that might be outside of our remit. Any other further questions? Okay, so I'll go now to recommendations. The Local Development Committee is asked to resolve: 1, agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report, and 2, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement deed of variation under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and further details. For those members. Oh, is it different? Oh, sorry, Vincent. Got to bring you in.
Yes, it's a tiny matter. On the recommendation there, under Section 106, it should also add Section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act.
Okay, so Section 106 and Section 106A of the Town and Country Act.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so
tiny thing.
Yeah, so following Vincent's interjection there, Section 106 and Section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, based on the heads of identified in Appendix 10 of the committee report and conditions listed on Appendix 9 of the committee report. For those members that agree, please show of hands. And that is unanimous. And that's approved. Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you very much, Ferdy, for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. And we move now to item 8, which is an exciting area for us. Forest Gate Police Station, 350 to 360. Can we see the presentation for that?
Chair, so geographic wise, we're just going next door from through this site. Okay, this is item 8, which seeks plan permission at Forest Gate Police Station on the junction of Romford Road and Green Street. The site is an existing corner police station on the southern side of Romford Road and western side of Green Street, and an undeveloped parcel of land to the west of the police station site access from Westbury Road, referred to in the report as the acquisition site. The roof of the police station was severely damaged by fire in March 2024, with the remains of the roof subsequently removed. The site is surrounded by a mix of terraced 2-storey dwelling houses and larger 2-storey buildings to the north, which are in use as hotels. The image on this slide shows an aerial context of the site viewed from the south, demonstrating the removed roof following the fire in March 2024. The image also shows the acquisition site to the west of the car park. The image on the left shows the existing building as viewed from Romford Road, and the image on the right shows the building as viewed from Green Street. Planning permission is sought for a replacement roof level following the fire, along with the erection of a 3-storey rear extension to provide additional police station facilities, revised and expanded car parking servicing areas, installation of substation and switch rooms, new vehicle crossover to Green Street, landscaping and other minor associated works. Here are the key considerations, which are the principle of development, urban design, neighbouring amenity, sustainable transport, waste management, sustainable development, archaeology and employment. These images show from left to right the site ground floor plan and first floor plan of the development. The images from left to right in this slide show the second and third floor / roof plan. The images on this slide show the eastern elevation as viewed from Green Street and the western elevation. And these images show from left to right the northern elevation as viewed from Romford Road and the southern elevation as viewed from within the car park. Principle of development. Policy S1 is of specific relevance in this instance of the London Plan. This policy outlines the need for social infrastructure facilities to be of high quality, to be inclusive and accessible to all sections of the community, including disabled and older people, and be located within easy reach by walking, cycling and public transport. This is also reiterated in policy INF 8 of the new local plan, which also requires development for community facilities to be located in town centres and when not meet the exceptions criteria. Whilst the police station is not located within a town centre, consideration is given to the existing use of the site as a working police station, and the site can accommodate such an expansion. Furthermore, the development meets the exception criteria as it would be for the provision of an emergency service provider. Given the nature of a police station, it can be used by all members of the community when needed. Therefore, the principle of development is supported. Urban design. The replacement of the roof is supported as it would largely replicate the roof that was destroyed by the fire in its scale and appearance. Whilst a sizable development in isolation, the proposed rear extension is considered appropriate in its scale and appearance in the context of the existing building and wider site. The extension would be of a stepped form and would be constructed of matching sandstone for the base and buff colour brick slips for the upper floors. The proposed landscaping works are also welcomed, both in terms of urban design and biodiversity. As such, the development is supported in respect to urban design. Neighbouring amenity. The proposed development has demonstrated to not harm levels of daylight and sunlight towards surrounding properties. This is by the stepped form of the rear extension and its setting from the western and southern boundaries. The development is also considered to not pose adverse impacts towards adjacent occupiers in respect to outlook, including enclosure and overbearing, privacy and general noise and disturbance. Whilst it's considered in general that proposed lighting will not harmfully impact neighbours, it is considered reasonable to secure details of a lighting strategy for the development to ensure that levels and direction of light are not to the detriment of neighbours. Subject to the conditions the development is supporting in respect to neighbouring amenity. Transport, servicing and waste. The site is in a P-TAL of 4, which indicates good access to public transport. The development will provide additional car parking spaces. Whilst this is typically resisted, considerations given towards the car parkings for the operational use by the Metropolitan Police and not for staff to park their private vehicles when commuting to and from work. In association with the car parking, EV charging points are proposed in which its quantum is supported. The ability for on-street parking permits will be restricted by a Section 106 legal agreement. The quantum of cycle parking and refuse storage provided is supported with a condition recommended for cycle parking details to ensure that they're safe, secure and weatherproof. Therefore, the proposal is supported in relation to impacts to transport, servicing and waste, subject to conditions and Section 106 agreement. When other considerations include sustainable development, which includes a zero carbon contribution of just under £13,000. It complies with the 10% increase requirement of biodiversity net gain. And there are no current issues with archaeology subject to submission of a written scheme of investigation, which is standard for historic England glass, and a financial contribution for employment. With respect to all the above matters, the proposal is supported as detailed on pages 143 and 147 of the committee report. Therefore, the Local Development Committee is asked to resolve to 1, agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report, the update report, and 2, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, based on the heads of terms identified in Appendix 10 of the committee report and conditions listed in Appendix 9 of the same report. Thank you.
Thanks. Vincent Gabe, you like to...
I just ask a procedural question before I start. I think that there's an addendum to the report. Do the members need that, or are they making a resolution on the committee report without that addendum? Do they need it to actually agree the changes to the conditions?
Members. So we was sent a updated report before this meeting. Yes.
By the office. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm just wondering whether it needs to be shared.
Members would have had that circulated to them for their own view. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
My name is Gary. Like Frank, we advise the Metropolitan Police Service on town planning. As the officer said, the police station was subject to extensive fire damage in 2024, and we haven't been able to occupy site since. It's an important site for police in the borough, and operating the news has caused significant disruption to policing in the borough. The proposal of reinstatement of the police station is going to be occupied here, also to address at the same time a shortage of police accommodation. The proposal represents an unusual opportunity to invest in improving policing. We're pleased to have reached this point, having a recommendation for approval, which has taken significant work. The overriding concern at the stage of the Met Police is to re-occupy the police station as soon as possible. And every week and month being important in terms of operational policing and getting back in there. Subject to the committee's decision today, we're keen to discuss how the Section 106 and planning conditioning pre-commencement condition process can be speeded up, because it's quite a lengthy process. So we may get some resolution tonight. We might spend months sort of talking about Section 106, which are quite decent points, but they'll still delay reoccupation. And again, pre-commencement conditions could take quite a lot of time. We think hotbeds to get in the implementation could take at least 6 months, which is a real shame in terms of operational policing. So we have exchanged some messages with Samira about this. And I think the intention is to discuss it after this committee, but we do want to use this opportunity to highlight how important that is, and to hopefully look at ways that can be speeded up with made some suggestions. So We appreciate that that is primarily a matter probably for the statutory officers, but we did want to take this opportunity to highlight those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and well within time. Members, any questions? None. Is there a question? Councillor Faloda.
Now, also given that what's happening, fire, when the fire, the old place was the fault, no, the street was the fault. How do you manage when you find that doesn't stop the whole street?
I'm not the contractor who built it, but my understanding is that with long construction, it's the council and it doesn't discuss those streets. I think it's to do it within the holdings that you see inside.
Okay. Vincent, I see you indicating to come in.
Yes, just another tiny sort of point on Appendix 10 of the report under transport, the first sort of bullet point there should be a reference to Section 16 of the Greater London Council General Powers Act 1974, because that is the only power that allows you to restrict granting parking permits. So Section 16 of the Greater London Council General Powers Act 1974.
That's Appendix 10.
That's Appendix 10. First bullet point under number 18, transport.
Okay.
Basically, to waive all of the rights of entitlement to grant parking permits, that can only be done under Section 16 of the Greater London Authority Powers Act 1974.
And that's for members, the last page, 171. Okay, thank you very much, Vincent.
That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Hart? No. I had a question around the EV charging and how many how many bays for EV would there be for EV charging stations? Would that be present?
I think it's 8.
8, okay.
Which does meet the London Plan ratio when you take the existing and proposed parking spaces as a whole.
Yeah. Would that be for, I imagine, officers' domestic cars, or would that be for police cars?
Just operational.
Operational cars, okay. And in terms of we've spoken a lot about Section 106, but in terms of our own policy of getting 35% of employment from local residents, is that something that you're looking into? It's in the heads of terms, okay. And will that be at all levels, not just at, say, Ricky, Sparkies, or anyone else, but also project managers, if possible? Okay.
I mean, no doubt this is through Section 163. Standard process must be avoided for looking to see that. So we understand the governing.
Okay, is that something that we can share at once it's agreed? Okay. And if I can ask us just to go back a few slides, showing the stepped approach.
Or that one?
That one, yeah. Oh, yeah, so that's quite good to see. In terms of, I guess, the neighbouring buildings, will there be any impact in terms of light or overshadowing?
No, so because of its stepped form, it passes the 25-degree test, which is the line taken from a centre of the window, and those 25-degree tests were taken from the rear ground floor windows. So because of its stepped form, it passes 25-degree test, and from that assessment, officers said that it do not have adverse impact from daylight or sunlight, or require the need for a daylight sunlight assessment.
Okay. Any questions from members? Okay, let's move now to the recommendations. There's no further questions. I can read it out. The local development, yeah, just so that members can see as well what we're agreeing. The Local Development Committee is asked to resolve: one, agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report, and two, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under section 106. Vincent, is that correct? Section 106, not 106A?
It's section 106 here because it's not a deed of variation.
Thank you very
It's a
much.
straightforward deed.
Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990, based on the heads of terms identified on Appendix 10 of the committee report, as updated in the update report, and conditions listed on Appendix 9 of the committee report. Those members who agree, please show of hands. Okay, and that is unanimous, so permission approved. Thank you very much for attending. And the final item is item 9, date for the next meeting, and that will be on the 16th of July. And we will close the meeting now, and it's 7:40. Thank you all very much for attending. It's not in the agenda. We can, I think once all